Tokyo Naval Headquarters, June 7, 1942, 6:47 a.m. Admiral Osami Nagano's fist hit the table. A teacup shattered. 4 carriers, gone in 6 minutes. The officer stared at the map. Red markers clustered near Midway. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. Underwater now. 3,000 men with them. Vice Admiral Onishi opened his mouth. We have nothing. Nagano cut him off. Nothing that can win this war. He yanked a blueprint from under the table, the 3rd Yamato-class battleship half-finished in Yokosuka. His red pen slashed across it. Not a battleship anymore. A carrier. Largest ever built. Armored to survive what killed the others. Sir, the resources. Find them. The steel from Manchuria. Find them. Nagano leaned forward. We build a ship that cannot die, or we admit we've already lost. Choose. Silence. 3 months. Hull converted. Engineers to Yokosuka. Now. Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. December 18, 1942. 620 hours. Saburo Teyata's knuckles rapped the steel plate. Wrong sound. Dead thud instead of a ring. Master, Kenji Sato 18, still soft-faced, held up a rivet gun. Problem. Teyata ran his thumb along the edge. Rough. Pitted. Where's this from? Sato checked the stamp. Batch 224, Osaka. Recycled. Teyata pressed harder. The surface gave slightly microscopic flecks that shouldn't exist in naval steel. Merchant grade. Maybe worse. But it passed inspection. No, it passed someone who stopped looking. Boots on the scaffold above. Heavy. Officer's pace. Commander Takashi Nomura appeared clipboard tight against his chest. Teyata, those plates should be installed. This steel's substandard. Install them. Commander, this goes below waterline. If it cracks... If. Nomura descended, stopped 2 feet away. Close enough Teyata could smell his tobacco. You questioning specifications. I'm questioning what we're given to work with. Question quieter. Install the plates. Nomura's voice dropped. You know what happens to workers who slow wartime production? Teyata met his eyes, said nothing. Your son's in Burma, Army engineer, would hate for his unit to draw difficult assignments. The shipyard noise, hammering, welding, shouting, pressed in from all sides. Teyata's hand tightened on the rivet gun. Install them, Nomura repeated. He walked away. Sato whispered, Master. Teyata picked up the first plate. It flexed in his hands. We do what we're told, and remember everything. March 15, 1944, 23:47 hours. The crack sounded like a gunshot. Teyata dropped his tools, ran toward the scream. Section C-40. A support beam snapped clean, hung at a sick angle. Beneath it, what was left of Hirota. 23 years old. Wife pregnant. Don't look. Teyata grabbed Sato's shoulder, turned him. Too late. The boy had seen. Nomura arrived, 2 MPs behind him. Clear out. Commander, that beam failed because... I said clear out. Nomura crouched, examined the break. Teyata saw it, the fracture pattern of brittle steel. Stress cracks spreading from inside. Nomura stood. Welding error. Worker negligence. That's not... You calling me a liar? The yard went silent. Even the hammering stopped. Workers watched from shadows. Teyata's jaw worked. The steel fractured. You can see the pattern. This wasn't welding. 3 seconds. Nobody breathed. Nomura smiled, leaned close. Your son. Burma. Engineer Corps. His voice barely audible. Lot of minefields need clearing out there. Casualties run high in those units. Teyata's hands shook. Get back to work. Nomura said louder. All of you. The hammering resumed. July 12, 1944. 1630 hours. Compartment C-47, batch 447. Steel had a gray tint. Recycled from demolished buildings. Melted, recast, worthless. Teata ran the brittleness test. Failed. Ran it again. Failed. Third time. Failed. The shift supervisor shrugged. No alternative. Use it or nothing. Nothing safer. Nothing won't finish the ship. Teata stared at the plate. Compartment C-47, starboard side, below waterline, between boiler room and magazine. If this failed, the flooding wouldn't stop. He thought about Hirota's widow, about his son clearing mines, about threats that weren't empty. At 1630, he installed it. Each rivet sounded wrong. Not the sharp ping of good steel. A muffled thud, like hammering clay. Sato heard it too. His hands kept stopping. The last rivet seated. Teata stepped back, pulled out his logbook. July 12, 1944. C-47 starboard. Batch 447. Test failed X3. No alternative. Installed under order. God forgive. That night, 0200, he wrote by candlelight. Hiroshi. If you read this, I'm dead. I built the Shinano with steel I knew would fail. I was ordered. I obeyed. Your life for theirs. I'm sorry. Father, he folded it with a steel sample into a wooden box, wrapped it in oilcloth, buried it under his apartment floor. Evidence. For whoever asks why. October 8th, 1944. 14:20 hours. Launch day. The Shinano's hull hit water. The crowd roared. Bands played. Priests chanted blessings over shortcuts and desperation. Teata stood at the back. Silent. Sato found him. Master, we did it, largest carrier in the world. We built a lie. What? Look, really look. Teata pointed. Half those compartments aren't sealed. Damage control doesn't work. Ventilation can't handle fires. And the hull. He stopped. The hull is mistakes held together with rivets. The Admirals said, the Admirals are terrified, so they built something big enough to hide inside. Teata turned to leave. Come on, we're done. Where are we going? Home, to pray for the men sailing on our mistakes. November 16th, 1944. 0900 hours. Captain's inspection. Captain Toshio Abe stepped aboard. Battle of Guadalcanal veteran. 3 destroyer commands. Chosen for competence and obedience. Commander Yasuhiro Nakamura met him at the gangway. Captain, welcome. Abe walked past him. Started touring. 6 hours. He didn't speak, just looked. Touched things. Opened doors meant to be sealed, found them incomplete. Checked fire systems they didn't work. Tested watertight doors they leaked. 1500 hours, flight deck. Abe stared at the horizon. How much is finished? Nakamura hesitated. 65%. When do we sail? November 28th, sir. 12 days. Yes, sir. Long silence. Then, do the men know this ship will kill them? Nakamura's breath caught. Captain, I've commanded destroyers, small ships. Every rivet matters because there's no room for error. This, he gestured at the massive deck. This is the largest warship in the world. Half doesn't work. Do the men know? No, sir, they believe. Good. Let them. We'll need that belief. That night, Abe radioed combined fleet request delay. Critical systems incomplete. Ship not combat ready. 20 minutes later, denied. Depart Nav 28 as scheduled. Morale paramount. Proceed. Abe read it 3 times. Burned it. In his cabin, he opened his journal. They gave me the world's largest warship and 12 days to make it float. Not fight. Float. For photographs, newsreels, propaganda. But I'm not a propagandist. I'm a captain. I know the difference between a weapon and a symbol. So will the Americans. November 28, 1944, 05:45 hours. The Shinano's engines rumbled awake. On Yokosuka Pier, Teyata watched. Civilian workers still crawled across her decks. Cables everywhere. Welders sparking in pre-dawn dark. She wasn't ready. Everyone could see it. Sato stood beside him. She's really sailing. Half done. Less than half. The mooring lines dropped. The carrier moved wake, churning white. Impossibly huge, turning toward open sea. Teyata watched until the mist took her. "Master," Sato's voice small. "Will she be okay?" Teyata thought about his letter. About batch 447 in C-47. About warnings nobody heard. No. Aboard Shinano Bridge. 0612 hours. Abe stood on the bridge wing. Tokyo Bay fading behind. Nakamura checked charts. Course for Kure, Captain, 18 hours. Estimated. Abe looked down at the flight deck still crawling with workers. Everything about this ship is estimated. Sir? Nothing. Maintain course. Keep lookout sharp. If there are submarines out here, they'll see us before we see them. USS Archerfish, 300 miles southeast 0630 hours. Commander Joseph Enright surfaced briefly. Batteries recharging. He scanned the horizon through binoculars. Empty ocean. Another patrol. No targets. He didn't know yet. In 16 hours, his periscope would find the largest target any submarine commander ever got. Yokosuka Teyata's apartment, 0700 hours. Beneath the floorboards, a wooden box waited. Inside a letter, a steel sample, and the truth. Compartment C-47 below waterline. A welder tapped his last seam. Finished. He rapped his hammer against the hull to test it. Dead thud. He frowned. Tapped again. Same sound. He shrugged. Moved on. Behind the plate, invisible to eye or hammer fractures, spread through batch 447 steel, like spider cracks through ice. The Shinano sailed into darkness. 515 souls aboard. 71,000 tons of ambition, desperation, and compromised metal. 17 hours of life remaining. And in the deep Pacific, a hunter waited desperate for redemption, unaware he was about to deliver the greatest submarine kill in naval history. The dream forged in defeat was sailing toward nightmare, and nobody could stop it anymore. The Shinano moved through darkness at 18 knots. Too fast for a shakedown cruise. Too fast for an unfinished ship. But orders were orders, and Captain Abe had learned long ago that the Imperial Navy didn't negotiate. November 28th, 1944, 1900 hours, 12 hours since departure. The sun had set an hour ago, turning the Pacific black as oil. Abe stood on the bridge binoculars, scanning nothing. Beside him, Navigator Lieutenant Araki plotted their course with shaking hands. "Nervous, Lieutenant." Araki looked up. "Sir, we're running without destroyer escort. In submarine waters. At night." The escorts were reassigned. Fuel shortages. Abe lowered his binoculars. "So we run fast, and we run dark. Speed is our defense now." "But sir, at this speed, if we take damage..." "If we take damage, Lieutenant, speed won't matter anyway." Abe turned back to the darkness. "Maintain course. Maintain speed." Below deck in the engine room, Chief Engineer Shota watched pressure gauges climb. The boilers were running hot, too hot. New equipment untested pushed beyond recommended limits. But the captain wanted 18 knots, so 18 knots he'd get. "Chief!" A young machinist pointed at a valve. "Steam leak. Gaskets failing." Shota examined it. The seal was already melting. "Replace it." "Sir, we don't have replacements. Supply officer said they're on the next shipment." "The next shipment." Shota laughed bitter, exhausted. "Everything we need is on the next shipment. Patch it. Use whatever you can find." The machinist wrapped the valve in canvas soaked in grease. It wouldn't last. They both knew it. But it would last long enough for this shift. Someone else's problem tomorrow. In the crew quarters forward, Ensign Yasuda tried to sleep on a bunk that still smelled of fresh paint. Around him, 300 sailors crammed into a space designed for 200. Half the compartment's ventilation didn't work. The air was thick, hot chemical. Someone coughed. Then someone else. Within minutes, a dozen men were coughing paint fumes, mixing with poor ventilation and too many bodies. "Open the hatches," someone said. "Can't. Blackout protocols." "Then we suffocate." Yasuda sat up. 22 years old, fresh from Naval Academy. This was his first assignment. He'd imagined something glorious. This wasn't glorious. This was 300 men packed into a metal box that smelled like poison. "Crack the hatch," he said. "Just enough for air." "Sir Blackout, do you want to report mass casualties from fume inhalation?" Yasuda stood. "Crack it. I'll take responsibility." The hatch opened 3 inches. Fresh air poured in. Men breathed. Yasuda made a note. "Ventilation system, C deck, forward, non-functional. Crew at risk." He had 17 pages of such notes. None of it mattered. The ship was already at sea. On the bridge, 2100 hours, Commander Nakamura brought the damage control report. Abe read it by red flashlight. 12 leaks, 11 electrical failures, 6 ventilation systems down, and we've been underway for 15 hours. "Yes, sir." "What happens at 16 hours?" Nakamura said nothing. Abe handed back the report. "Double the watches. I want reports every 30 minutes. And get those civilian workers off the deck. If we need to maneuver." "Sir, they're still installing equipment. The starboard radar isn't." "I don't care if they're installing the Emperor's personal toilet. Get them below, now." "Yes, sir." Nakamura left. Abe was alone on the bridge wing. He thought about his message to Fleet Headquarters. Ship not ready. He thought about the response. Proceed as ordered. He thought about the 515 men aboard, whose lives depended on equipment that didn't work, systems that weren't finished, and steel that might not hold. He thought about what it meant to command a symbol instead of a ship. Below, in compartment C-47, water dripped. Just a few drops, seeping through a weld that hadn't fully penetrated. Nobody heard it over the engine noise. Nobody saw it in the darkness. Just water finding weakness, doing what water does. 22:47 hours. The officer's wardroom. 6 men around a table eating rice and pickled vegetables. Not speaking. Too tired to speak. Lieutenant Commander Miura, the gunnery officer, broke the silence. "Anyone else think this is insane?" Heads turned. Running full speed with no escort, half the ship unfinished, in submarine waters. Miura put down his chopsticks. "It's suicide." "Careful." Lieutenant Kato, communications officer, glanced at the door. "That's close to defeatist talk." "I'm not being defeatist. I'm being realistic. This ship is the largest carrier in the world," Kato interrupted. "Armored flight deck, reinforced hull. She can take punishment." "Can she? Or is that what we tell ourselves?" Miura leaned forward. "I've walked this ship. I've seen the shortcuts. Half the watertight doors don't seal properly. The pumps." "Enough." Yasuda, the youngest at the table, spoke quietly. "We're here. The ship is here. Fear doesn't change that." Miura stared at him. "You're what, 22? 23. You know what I was doing at 23 Midway? Watching the Kaga burn with 300 men trapped inside. So forgive me if I don't share your optimism." Silence fell again, heavier now. Finally, Kato said, "What would you have us do?" Mutiny turned back. "I'd have us tell the truth." Miura stood. "But the truth doesn't matter anymore. Only symbols matter, and we're the men sailing inside a symbol." He left. The others sat quietly. Someone eventually picked up his chopsticks. Someone else asked for tea. The conversation moved to safer topics, home, families, anything but the ship they were on. But they all thought it. Every one of them. This ship will kill us. 00:30 hours, November 29th, 17.5 hours since departure. In the enlisted mess, a sailor named Kobayashi played cards with 3 others. Petty officer first class, 15 years in the Navy. He'd survived Coral Sea, survived the Solomons, survived things that should have killed him. "You're cheating," someone said. "I'm winning. There's a difference." "Nobody's luck is that good?" Kobayashi grinned. "My luck is legendary. I've been in 4 major battles. Never got a scratch. This ship," he tapped the table, "she's unsinkable. Biggest carrier ever built. We're sailing home in the safest vessel in the fleet." "You believe that?" "I have to believe something." Kobayashi dealt another hand. "Otherwise, why are we here?" 30 feet away in the galley, Cook Tanaka prepared rice for the morning watch. 46 years old. Too old for combat duty, assigned to feed men instead of fighting beside them. He'd been cooking on warships for 20 years. This was his first time cooking afraid. Something was wrong with this ship. He felt it in his bones. The way she moved, too stiff, not flexing with the waves like a proper ship should. The sounds she made, creaks and groans from places that shouldn't creak or groan. And the leaks. Always leaks. Water seeping through bulkheads, pooling in corners, salt water mixing with bilge. He'd mentioned it once to a petty officer. Been told to shut up and cook. So he cooked. And wondered how many meals he had left to prepare. Hours. Engine room. Chief Shoda's shift should have ended 2 hours ago, but his replacement was sick fume inhalation from the ventilation failure. So Shoda stayed watching gauges, adjusting valves, keeping the massive engines running at a speed they weren't designed to maintain. "Chief," the same young machinist from before. "That patch we made? It's failing." Shoda climbed down to look. Steam hissed from the improvised canvas seal, already blackened and brittle. "How long will it hold?" "Minutes, maybe." "Replace it." "With what we're out of gasket material." Shoda looked around, spotted a leather belt hanging on a tool rack. Someone's belt. He grabbed it, cut it into strips, wrapped it around the valve. The leather sizzled and smoked, but held. "That won't last the night," the machinist said. "It doesn't need to last the night, just needs to last this watch." Shoda climbed back to his station. Someone else's problem in 4 hours. But he wrote it in his log: emergency repair valve 47B. Temporary. Critical replacement needed immediately. Another note nobody would read until it was too late. 02:30 hours. Bridge. Abe hadn't left his post in 9 hours. Nakamura brought him tea. "Captain, you should rest." "I'll rest in Kure." Abe sipped the tea. It was cold. Status. No changes. Still maintaining 18 knots. No contacts. Weather. Clear. Calm seas. Visibility excellent. Excellent for us. Excellent for them too. Abe scanned the horizon again. "What's our position?" 40 miles south of Honshu, deep water, about... Nakamura checked his watch. 9 hours from Kure. 9 hours. Abe nodded slowly. "We just need 9 more hours. But he knew. Any submarine commander worth his dolphins wouldn't attack in coastal waters. Too shallow, too many patrol boats. No, they'd wait until a target was in deep water far from help. They'd wait until the target was fat, slow, and overconfident. They'd wait for exactly where the Shinano was right now. 300 miles away, USS Archerfish cruised at periscope depth. Commander Joseph Enright studied charts in the red glow of the control room. Another patrol day almost done. No contacts, no kills. His last 2 patrols, nothing. Before that, a transport hit that didn't sink. His reputation was sinking faster than his targets. "Skipper." The sonar operator's voice. Casual, not urgent. "Got something. Bearing 045. Range. Unclear. Multiple contacts maybe. Enright moved to sonar. What kind of contacts? Big. Fast. Lots of screws. Warships. Going where? South. Toward Kure probably. Enright checked the chart. A convoy heading to Kure meant capital ships. Maybe cruisers. Maybe something bigger. Battle stations. Silent running. Make your depth 80 feet. Come to course 045. The archer fish tilted downward, descending into darkness. Hunting. At 03117 hours, Enright raised the periscope for 5 seconds. What he saw made his breath stop. A carrier. Massive. Silhouetted against the moon. Flight deck longer than 3 football fields. Displacing, he did the math quickly, at least 70,000 tons. The largest thing he'd ever seen through a periscope. And she was alone. No escorts. Running straight and fast like she owned the ocean. Downscope. Enright stepped back, mind racing. This was impossible. Carriers didn't travel alone. Especially not carriers this size. But there she was, and here he was, and the geometry was perfect. Firing solution. 6 bow tubes. Spread pattern. Target bearing 045 range. He calculated. 4,000 yards. Speed 18 knots. His exec Lieutenant Barnes whispered, "Skipper, if that's what I think it is. It's exactly what you think it is." Enright watched the targeting data feed into the firing computer. Set depth 12 feet. We hit her below the waterline. Multiple strikes. 12 feet is shallow. If we miss, we're not missing. Enright's voice was cold. Certain. This was redemption. This was everything he'd failed to do in 2 years of war, compressed into the next 60 seconds. On the Shinano 031 hours, Ensign Yasuda walked the deck. Night watch. His breath fogged in the cold air. Above, stars scattered across a clear sky. Below, black water rushing past the hull. Beautiful. Peaceful. Wrong. Everything felt wrong. The ship moved too stiffly. The deck vibrated at a frequency that set his teeth on edge, and sounds metallic groans from deep inside that shouldn't exist. He stopped at the railing, looked down at the water. His reflection rippled there, distorted, ghost-like. Behind his reflection below the waterline, he could see weight. Was that the first torpedo struck at 03117 hours and 42 seconds? Frame 143 starboard side, just forward of the bridge. The explosion tore through compartment C-47, where batch 447 steel waited brittle and compromised. The hull split. Water pressure did the rest, forcing open seams, collapsing bulkheads, flooding spaces that had never been properly sealed. Yasuda was thrown 10 feet, hit the deck, ears ringing, sirens screaming, men shouting. The ship lurched hard to starboard. Second torpedo, 0317-54. Frame 167. Another massive hole punched below the waterline. Third torpedo. 0318-03. Frame 189. The boiler room. Fourth torpedo. 0311-11. Frame 201. The forward magazine. 4 hits in 30 seconds. Yasuda staggered to his feet. The deck tilted beneath him. Smoke poured from ventilators. Below, men were screaming. He could hear them trapped, drowning, dying. He ran for the nearest hatch, yanked it open. Black smoke and steam blasted out. He recoiled, fell back, lungs burning. "Seal that hatch!" Someone grabbed him. Petty officer. Face blackened, uniform torn. "You'll flood the whole deck! There are men down there! There are men everywhere! Seal it!" Yasuda stared into the darkness below. He could still hear screaming, getting fainter, the water rising. He sealed the hatch. On the bridge, Abe grabbed the railing as the ship rolled. Alarms everywhere. Damage reports flooding in. Nakamura beside him, face white. 4 hits. Starboard side, major flooding compartments, C40 through C60. Counter flooding. Correct the list. Sir, the pumps. I don't care what's wrong with the pumps. Flood the port tanks. Level this ship. Yes, sir. Abe looked out at the darkness. 4 torpedoes. Professional attack. Submarine commander who knew exactly what he was doing, and the Shinano damaged flooding listing had maybe one chance. All ahead, full maintain speed. Nakamura turned. Sir, with flooding if we maintain speed. If we slow down, we're dead in the water. Dead ships die. Moving ships survive. All ahead, full. The order went down. In the engine room, Chief Shota heard it and cursed. Maintain speed with half the hull flooding. Maintain speed when every bulkhead was straining. Madness, but orders were orders. He opened the throttles wide. The engines screamed. The leather belt patch on valve 47B finally gave way. Steam blasting out, scalding 2 men who'd been standing too close. They fell screaming. Medics rushed in. The valve kept bleeding steam. "Shut it down," someone yelled. "Can't. We need full power. We'll lose pressure." Then we lose pressure. Shota grabbed a wrench, tried to tighten the valve manually. The metal was too hot. It burned through his gloves. He held on anyway, feeling skin blister. Finally got it tight enough to slow the leak. Not stop it. Slow it. He looked at his hands. Blistered. Bleeding. Shaking. "Chief, you need medical?" "I need this engine running." Shota turned back to the gauges. "Get those men to sickbay. Everyone else stay on station. We hold until we're ordered otherwise." In compartment C-45, 2 frames forward of the torpedo hit water poured through a split seam. The impact had cracked steel that was already compromised. Batch 447 installed, despite warnings now failing exactly as predicted. Petty Officer Hamada and 5 men tried to shore up the bulkhead with wooden beams. The water was waist deep, rising fast, cold enough to stop breath. "It's not working," someone shouted. "Keep bracing." Hamada wedged another beam. "If this bulkhead goes, the whole forward section floods. It's already flooding. Then we slow it down." A beam splintered, water pressure too much. The bulkhead began to bow inward slowly at first, then faster. "Get out! Everyone out!" They scrambled for the ladder. Hamada went last. As he climbed, he looked back. The bulkhead collapsed, water exploding through like a dam breaking. It swallowed the compartment in seconds. Another space gone. Another piece of the ship dying. He sealed the hatch behind him, leaned against it gasping. How many compartments could they lose before the math became impossible? 0345 hours. 28 minutes since the attack. The Shinano listed 18 degrees to starboard. Speed had dropped to 12 knots. The bow rode lower, heavier with every minute. Abe stood on the tilted bridge, holding on to the railing. Around him, organized chaos officers shouting reports, damage control teams scrambling the ship, groaning like a dying animal. Nakamura appeared. "Captain Destroyer captains are requesting permission to come alongside. They can take off crew." Denied. "Sir, we're flooding. If we don't?" "If we take men off, we admit she's sinking. We don't admit that. Not yet." Abe turned to face him. "Send to all destroyers. Maintain station. Prepare rescue gear, but do not approach." "Captain." "That's an order, Commander." Nakamura left. Abe was alone with his ship, his dying ship. He'd known. From the first inspection, he'd known she wasn't ready. But he'd obeyed orders. Sailed anyway. And now, 2 515 men would pay for that obedience. No, not 2 of 515. He'd save as many as he could. But first he had to keep the ship afloat long enough for rescue. "How long until dawn?" he asked the navigator. 3 hours, sir." 3 hours. If they could last 3 hours, help would come. Air cover. More destroyers. Maybe even salvage ships to tow her to shallow water. 3 hours felt like 3 years. Below in the flooded compartments, men died alone in darkness. Some drowned quickly. Others trapped in air pockets died slowly, listening to water rise, screaming for help that never came. Their voices echoed through the hull, ghostly, desperate, fading. Ensign Yasuda couldn't stop hearing them. He'd sealed that hatch, sealed men inside to save men outside. The math was sound, the decision correct. But those screams. He sat on the tilted deck, hands shaking, and wept. A sailor approached. "Sir, you okay?" "I sealed them in." Yasuda looked up. "I heard them screaming and I sealed the hatch anyway." "You saved this section. You did the right thing." "Did I?" Yasuda stood. "Or did I just choose which men die?" The sailor had no answer. In the galley, cook Tanaka prepared rice balls. The galley tilted 18 degrees. Water sloshed across the floor. The ship was dying. But men still needed to eat. So he cooked. His hands worked automatically, shaping rice, adding, filling, wrapping seaweed. He'd made 10,000 rice balls in 20 years. These would be his last. He knew it. Everyone knew it. But he cooked anyway, because that's what you did. You kept doing your job until the job didn't matter anymore. Kobayashi, the sailor who'd bragged about his luck hours earlier, appeared in the galley doorway. Soaking wet, face pale. "Still cooking?" His voice hollow. "Someone has to." Tanaka handed him a rice ball. "Here, eat." Kobayashi stared at it, started laughing. Bitter, broken laughter. "I told them my luck was legendary. Told them this ship was unsinkable." He looked at Tanaka. "I'm a liar. Just a liar trying to believe his own lies. We're all liars tonight." Tanaka made another rice ball. "Eat. You'll need strength for whatever comes next." Kobayashi ate. Tasted nothing. Swallowed anyway. 05:20 hours. 2 hours since the attack. The list had increased to 25 degrees. Speed 6 knots. The bow was underwater now, the stern rising. On the bridge, Abe listened to reports he didn't want to hear. Forward magazines flooded. Boiler room 3 offline. Port engine dead. Pumps overwhelmed. Electrical failures cascading. We've lost... Stop! Abe held up a hand. "Commander Nakamura. Truth. How long do we have?" Nakamura hesitated. Then, "Hours, maybe 2, maybe less. And if we beach her, no land within range. Even if there was, we're too damaged, too slow." Abe nodded slowly. He'd known. But hearing it aloud made it real. "Prepare to abandon ship." "Sir." "You heard me. Quietly. Don't announce it yet. But prepare lifeboats, life rafts. Get the wounded topside. When I give the word, I want organized evacuation. No panic." "Yes, sir." Nakamura left. Abe stood alone on the bridge, the captain of the largest carrier in the world, watching his command die beneath him. He thought about his journal. His final entry would be simple. "I was given a symbol to command." But symbols don't float. Only ships do. And this was never really a ship. But even in darkness, even with death hours away, men aboard the Shinano still fought. Not because they believed they'd win, but because surrender wasn't something they'd learned. In engine rooms, engineers kept pumps running on nothing but will. In damage control stations, sailors braced bulkheads with their bodies. In flooded compartments, men formed human chains to pass wounded toward hatches. And somewhere deep inside the dying ship, Batch 447 steel continued to fail, cracks, spreading seams, opening water, finding every weakness that shortcuts and desperation had built into her hull. The Shinano had 17 hours left to live. 17 hours since she'd sailed from Yokosuka, proud and massive and doomed. But in those hours, 2 to 515 men would learn something admirals never taught. That courage doesn't prevent drowning. It only changes how you face the water rising around you. Dawn was coming. So was the end. And between them lay the longest night any of them would ever know. At 06:15 hours, as the eastern horizon began to pale from black to gray, Captain Abe gave the order he'd been avoiding for 3 hours. Abandon ship. The words felt like glass in his throat. Nakamura stood beside him waiting. The commander's uniform was soaked saltwater sweat oil, his face blank with exhaustion. All hands topside. Wounded first. Organized evacuation. No running. No panic. Abe paused. And Commander send to Combined Fleet Shinano sinking. Request immediate assistance. Position. He checked the chart one last time. 33 degrees north, 137 degrees east. Nakamura's hand shook as he wrote the coordinates. Sir, what about... I'll be the last one off. Standard procedure. Captain, you can't. I can and I will. Abe met his eyes. This ship dies because I sailed her unready. I don't leave until every man who can leave has left. That's not negotiable. Nakamura saluted. Left. His footsteps echoed on the tilted deck. Abe looked out at the gray dawn breaking over black water. Somewhere out there, an American submarine was diving deep, running silent, celebrating the biggest kill of the war. They didn't know yet. Wouldn't know for days, maybe weeks. But they'd gotten her. 4 torpedoes, 4 hits, and the unsinkable dream was sinking. He pulled out his journal. Last entry. His hand cramped from exhaustion, but he wrote clearly. 0615, Novi 29. Ordered abandon ship. List 30 degrees. Bow submerged. Perhaps 90 minutes remain. I commanded men to sail in a ship I knew would fail. They trusted me. I failed them, but I will not fail them in death. I stay until the end. Not for honor. I have no honor left. But because someone must witness what we built with lies. Someone must remember. T. Abe. He closed the journal, left it on the chart table. Whoever found it would know. Below deck, organized chaos became simple chaos. The announcement abandoned ship hit like a second torpedo strike. Men who'd been holding on fighting, believing suddenly understood it was over. The largest carrier in the world was dying, and they had maybe an hour to get off. Ensign Yasuda moved through the tilted corridors, helping wounded men climb ladders that now angled like cliffs. Each step harder than the last. The ship groaned around them, metal screaming bulkheads collapsing somewhere deep below water, rushing through spaces that should have held. Keep moving. He pushed a sailor forward. The man's leg was broken, makeshift splint already failing. Just get topside. Destroyers will pick us up. Will they? The sailor looked at him. Will there be enough boats? Yasuda didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He didn't know if there'd be enough boats. The Shinano carried lifeboats for maybe half her crew. The rest would need rafts debris luck. At the next junction he found a watertight door sealed. Behind it sounds, pounding, voices, screaming. He grabbed the wheel, spun it, locked. Someone had sealed it from his side. Who sealed this? He shouted. A petty officer appeared. I did, sir. That section's flooding. Open it, we flood this section too. There are men in there. There are men everywhere, sir. We open that door, we kill 50 to maybe save 5. Yasuda stared at the door. The pounding continued, weaker now, the voices fading. He could hear words through the steel. Help us, please, don't leave us. How long before that section floods completely? Minutes, maybe 10. And if we pump it? Pumps are gone, sir, have been for an hour. Yasuda's hand stayed on the wheel. 5 men behind this door. 50 men behind him. The math was simple. The morality impossible. Sir, the petty officer's voice gentle. We have to go. The ship's rolling. When she tips past 35 degrees, these ladders become impossible. Yasuda removed his hand from the wheel, stepped back. The pounding grew more frantic. The voices screaming now. He could hear individual words. Names, prayers, pleas. He turned and climbed, each step heavier than carrying stones. Behind him, the voices grew fainter, then stopped. He would hear them for the rest of his life. Topside, 0640 hours. The flight deck tilted 32 degrees. Men lined the high side waiting for boats that weren't coming fast enough. The destroyers circled Isokaze, Yukikaze, Hamakaze, lowering boats, throwing lines, pulling men from water. But there were too many men. Not enough boats. Lieutenant Commander Miura, the gunnery officer who'd called this suicide hours ago, stood at the railing, helping wounded into lifeboats. His movements mechanical. Load the boat, lower away, bring it back, load again, over and over, not thinking. Thinking meant accepting what was happening. Sir. A young sailor beside him, maybe 19. Sir, should I jump? Miura looked down. 40 feet to the water now. The ship rolling further every minute. Can you swim? Yes, sir. Then wait for the next boat. Jumping breaks bones. But sir, if there's no next boat, then you jump. Miura grabbed another wounded man, helped him over the railing into waiting hands below. But not yet, not while boats are running. The sailor nodded, waited, shaking. Not from cold, from understanding that his life now depended on timing, luck, and mathematics he couldn't control. In the radio room, Lieutenant Kato sent the same message for the 15th time. Shinano sinking. Request immediate assistance. Position 33 north 137 east. Repeat, Shinano sinking. No response from combined fleet. Radio silence, either they weren't receiving or weren't acknowledging. Maybe both. Maybe Tokyo didn't want to admit their symbol was dying. Better to let her sink in silence than broadcast failure across the Pacific. Sir? The radio operator looked up. Should I keep transmitting? Until the power dies. Or we do. Kato checked the electrical board. Lights flickering. Generators struggling. How long do we have? 30 minutes. Maybe. Then we transmit for 30 minutes. The operator nodded. Kept sending. Morse code clicking into static. A voice in the dark, hoping someone was listening. At 0705 hours, the ship rolled past 35 degrees. The list became a lean. Walking on deck required holding railings. Sliding was easier than climbing. And below in the flooded compartments, the water found new paths, new weaknesses, accelerating the death spiral. Chief Engineer Shota refused to leave his post. His crew had evacuated 10 minutes ago. He'd ordered them out, but he stayed. One man, one engine room. Keeping the generators running so lights would work, so pumps might work, so maybe impossibly the ship might live. His hands, blistered and raw from the steam valve, worked the controls, adjusting pressure, balancing loads, coaxing power from machinery that should have failed an hour ago. Chief, a voice from above. Nakamura climbing down into the tilted engine room. What are you doing? I ordered this section evacuated. Generators are still running, sir. Someone needs to monitor them. The ship is sinking. Then she'll sink with lights on. Shota didn't turn from his gauges. I've been an engineer for 26 years, Commander. I don't abandon machinery while it's still working. Nakamura grabbed his shoulder, spun him around. The machinery doesn't matter anymore. It matters to the men still trapped below. It matters to the men trying to evacuate in darkness. It matters because... Shota's voice broke. Because I can't save the ship. But maybe I can save a few more men by giving them light to see by. They stared at each other. The engine room tilted further. A toolbox slid across the floor, crashed into a bulkhead. 5 more minutes, Nakamura said. Then we go together. Both of us. Yes, sir. Nakamura climbed back up. Shota returned to his gauges. 5 minutes. He'd give 5 minutes. Then he'd leave his engines to die alone. On the flight deck, Cook Tanaka handed out the last rice balls he'd ever make. Men took them with shaking hands. Some ate. Some just held them, something solid, something real, something from before the world tilted and broke. Thank you. A sailor bowed. For cooking, for staying. Where else would I go? Tanaka smiled, tired, sad. This is my kitchen. These are my men. I feed you until there's nothing left to feed. The sailor started crying. Not from fear, from the simple kindness of a rice ball in the middle of death. Kobayashi the sailor, who'd bragged about his luck, sat nearby. Silent now. His legendary luck had run out exactly when it mattered most. He held a life vest, but hadn't put it on. Just held it, staring at nothing. You should wear that, Tanaka said. Why? Kobayashi looked up. So I can float longer before I freeze the water's 4 degrees. I'll last maybe 20 minutes. Then you last 20 minutes. Maybe a boat finds you in 19. You believe that? I believe trying is better than not trying. Tanaka handed him a rice ball. Eat, then put on the vest, then survive. That's the order. Kobayashi took the rice ball. Started laughing again, that same bitter sound from hours ago. A cook giving me orders, on a sinking ship, while handing me food. He bit into the rice. This is the most insane day of my life. Mine too. Tanaka sat beside him. But we're still here. That counts for something. At 07:45 hours, Captain Abe left the bridge for the last time. The ship had maybe 30 minutes left. Most of the crew was off in boats in the water on destroyers. Maybe 1,500 saved. Maybe. That meant 1,000 still aboard. Wounded. Trapped, or refusing to leave. He walked the tilted deck, checking compartments. Found 3 men in the officer's wardroom trying to save the ship's log, the operational records, anything that might tell the story of what happened. Leave it, Abe said. Sir, these documents. Don't matter, get to the boats. But sir, the record. I'm the record. Abe's voice hard. I'm the captain. I know what happened. And I'm not leaving. So these papers either sink with me, or you abandon them now. Choose. They chose, dropped the papers, climbed out. Abe picked up the logbook, flipped through pages of normal operations routine reports, nothing that explained why 2 5-15 men had sailed on an unfinished ship into submarine waters. The truth wasn't in paperwork. The truth was in the men drowning below. He dropped the log, kept walking. Found Ensign Yasuda at the stern rail, staring at the water. Ensign. Yasuda turned, his face hollow, eyes dead. Sir, why aren't you in a boat? I sealed them in. The words flat, empty. 3 times. 3 different compartments. I heard them screaming, and I sealed the doors anyway, to save others. That's what they teach us, right? Sacrifice the few for the many. That's what they teach. Then why does it feel like murder? Abe moved beside him. Both men staring at black water churning past the dying hull. Because it is murder and survival, both at once. War doesn't let us choose clean options, Ensign. Only terrible ones and worse ones. Which did I choose? The terrible one. Which makes you better than most. Abe turned to face him. Now get in a boat. That's an order. What about you, sir? I'm the captain. I have different orders. From who? From me. Abe smiled, thin, sad. Go, Ensign. Live. Remember. Tell them what happened here. Someone needs to tell them. Yasuda saluted, climbed over the rail, slid down a rope into a waiting lifeboat. The boat pulled away, oars cutting water, moving toward a destroyer half a mile off. He looked back once, saw Abe standing alone at the rail. The captain raised one hand, not a wave, an acknowledgement, then turned and walked back into the dying ship. At 08:20 hours, the Shinano rolled past 45 degrees. Walking became crawling. Crawling became clinging. The destroyers pulled back, too dangerous to approach a capsizing ship. The boats stopped running. Men still aboard had 3 choices: jump, wait, or go down with the ship. Most jumped. The water was 4 degrees Celsius. cold enough to stop your heart in minutes. Men hit the surface and gasped in voluntary reflex. Salt water filled lungs. Some drowned immediately. Others thrashed, screamed, tried to swim toward distant destroyers. Some made it. Most didn't. Petty Officer Hamada, who'd braced bulkheads with wooden beams hours ago, floated on a piece of decking. Around him, men died. He could hear them calling for help, calling for mothers, calling for anything. He wanted to help, but helping meant leaving his debris swimming to them, and he knew he wouldn't make it back. So he floated, and listened, and hated himself. A sailor nearby, maybe 20 feet away, went under, came back up, went under again, didn't come back. Hamada closed his eyes, counted. 47. 47 men he'd seen die since jumping. He kept counting because stopping meant accepting this was real. On the Isokazi destroyer, crews threw lines to swimmers, pulled men aboard, wrapped them in blankets that didn't stop the shaking. Medics moved through rows of survivors, checking pulses, doing what they could with almost nothing. Commander Nakamura sat against a bulkhead blanket around his shoulders, staring at nothing. Beside him, Chief Shoda, hands wrapped in bandages, stared at the same nothing. "We left him," Nakamura said. "He ordered us off. We still left him." Shoda said nothing. What was there to say? They'd followed orders, abandoned their captain, survived. The math was simple, the guilt infinite. At 09:10 hours, the Shinano rolled past 60 degrees. The flight deck, designed to launch aircraft, now pointed at the sky. Men still clinging to railings lost their grip. Slid down steel that had been horizontal hours ago. Hit the water from heights that broke bones, split skulls killed before the cold could. Inside the ship, in the flooded compartments, the sealed sections, the spaces where men had been trapped since the torpedoes hit, water finally reached the air pockets. The last voices stopped. The last pounding ceased. Silence spread through the hull like a held breath. Captain Abe stood on what had been the bridge wing, now tilted nearly vertical. He held the railing with both hands. Below him, above him, the ocean waited. Around him, the ship groaned its death song. Metal-tearing bulkheads collapsing, the sounds of a 71,000-ton failure. He thought about his wife. His daughter, 7 years old last time he'd seen her. He'd promised to bring her a doll from Kure. That promise would stay broken. He thought about Teyata the Riveter, who'd known, who'd warned, who'd installed bad steel because threats mattered more than truth. He thought about Nagano, the Admiral, who'd demanded a ship that couldn't die. Who'd gotten exactly what he'd ordered, a symbol. Just a symbol. Nothing more. The ship tilted further. Abe's feet lost purchase. He hung from the railing boots, dangling over black water that rushed up to meet him. He let go. The fall took 3 seconds. The water hit like concrete. Cold crushed his chest. He sank, kicked, broke surface, gasped. Salt water burned his throat. Around him, debris, bodies, oil slicks, men swimming, drowning, dying. The destroyers circled like wolves, picking off survivors one by one. He didn't swim toward them, didn't call for help, just floated. Watching his ship, his command, his responsibility, his failure complete its final role. At 10:18 hours on November 29, 1944, the Shinano capsized completely. The hull hung upside down for 7 minutes, propellers pointing at gray sky, keel exposed to air for the first time since launch. Men trapped inside pounded on the hull from within. The sound carried across the water, desperate rhythmic fading. Then the bow dipped. The stern lifted. The ship slid backward into the Pacific. She went down in 4,000 feet of water. 17 hours and 33 minutes after sailing from Yokosuka, the largest aircraft carrier ever built. The unsinkable dream. Gone. On the Isokazi, men watched in silence. Some cried, some prayed. Some just stared, unable to process what they'd witnessed. Ensign Yasuda stood at the rail, wrapped in a blanket that didn't stop his shaking. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Miura. Neither spoke. What words fit this? How many? Yasuda finally asked. Got off. Miura's voice hollow. Maybe 1,400. In the water now. Fewer. And the rest? Gone. Drowned. Trapped. Dead. Miura turned away. All dead. The destroyers circled for 3 more hours, pulling men from water that killed faster than war. By 1,300 hours, the rescues stopped. No more survivors. Only bodies now floating face down in oil and debris. Final count. 080 rescued. 435 dead. The largest naval disaster in Japanese history. And Tokyo's order came swift silence. Tell no one. Report nothing. The Shinano never existed. But silence doesn't stop truth. It only delays it. And somewhere in the dark Pacific 4,000 feet down, the Shinano settled into mud. Her hull split open. Her compartments flooded. And in compartment C-47, batch 447, steel brittle, compromised, installed despite every warning, lay exposed to the deep, evidence waiting for someone to ask the right questions. On the destroyer's deck, Captain Abe sat wrapped in blankets staring at water that had swallowed his command. A medic tried to examine him. He waved them off. Nakamura approached, sat beside him. Neither spoke for long minutes. Finally Abe said, I knew. Sir. From the first inspection, I knew she wasn't ready. Knew the steel was bad. Knew the systems didn't work. Knew we were sailing to die. He looked at Nakamura. And I sailed anyway. Because orders are orders and duty is duty, and the Navy needed a symbol more than it needed men. You tried to delay. I tried. Then I obeyed. That's the problem, Commander. I knew I tried, and then I obeyed. 1,435 men drowned because I chose obedience over mutiny. Mutiny would have meant execution. Yes, my execution. For my refusal. Instead, 1,400 men executed for my compliance. Abe stood. Blanket fell. Which was the braver choice, Commander? Which was the right one? Nakamura had no answer. Neither did anyone. The question would haunt them all. In the water, Cook Tanaka floated on debris. Still alive. Barely. Destroyers had passed him twice too far to reach too many others closer. His rice balls were gone. His strength was gone. But he floated. Because stopping meant sinking. Beside him, 10 feet away, Kobayashi. Also floating. Also fading. Hey, Tanaka called. Voice weak. Cook, you still breathing? Unfortunately. Your legendary luck. Turns out legends die too. Kobayashi laughed. No sound came out. But I'm still here. That counts for something, right? That's what you said. Still being here counts. It does. Then why does it feel like drowning? Tanaka had no answer. The cold was taking him. His fingers numb. His thoughts fuzzing. He looked up at gray sky and thought about his kitchen, his men, his last batch of rice balls. Good rice balls. He'd done his job until the end. That counted. It had to count. The Hamikaze found them at 14:45 hours, pulled them aboard, wrapped them in blankets. Tanaka survived. Kobayashi survived. 2 men among 1,000 who didn't. Why them? Why not others? No reason, just luck. The cruel mathematics of disaster. Some live, most die. Reason plays no part. By 1600 hours, the rescue operation ended. The destroyers formed up, turned toward Japan, leaving behind an oil-slick debris field and silence where the world's largest carrier had been. In the radio room of the Isokaze, the final transmission went to Combined Fleet Shinano lost, 1,435 casualties, 1,080 rescued, returning to base. The response came in minutes. Report received. Maintain radio silence regarding vessel name. Refer to incident as transport loss in all communications. Details classified highest level. Even in death, the Shinano would be a lie. Built with lies, sailed with lies, sunk in silence. and now erased from history by order. But men remember what orders forget. Survivors remember. The dead silent forever remember through those who lived. And somewhere in a wooden box, buried under floorboards in Yokosuka, evidence waited. Truth once drowned always surfaces. Just takes time, sometimes years, sometimes decades. But it surfaces. The Shinano took 17 hours to sink. The truth would take 70 years to rise. But rise it would. The destroyers reached Kure Naval Base at 0340 hours on November 30th. Darkness still held. The survivors, wrapped in blankets, hollow-eyed shaking, were ordered to disembark in silence. No crowds, no reporters, no acknowledgement that anything had happened. Commander Nakamura stood on the dock watching his men file past. 1,000 faces, each one carrying the weight of 1,400 who weren't there. He wanted to say something, anything, but a naval intelligence officer appeared at his elbow. "Commander, you're to report to Admiral Nagano immediately. Now, my men need... now." Nakamura followed. Behind him, survivors were separated into groups and loaded onto trucks. Destination unknown. No one asked questions. Questions were dangerous now. Admiral Nagano waited in a room without windows. 3 other officers present, none introduced. Nakamura saluted. Nagano didn't return it. "Sit." Nakamura sat. Nagano slid a document across the table. "Read it. Sign it." Nakamura picked it up. His hands still shook from the cold water from the dying from everything. The document was brief. "I, Commander Yasuhiro Nakamura, hereby attest that on November 28-29, 1944, I served aboard transport vessel X-447, which suffered catastrophic damage from unknown causes and was lost at sea. I understand that all details of this incident are classified at the highest level, and that disclosure of any information constitutes treason punishable by death. I will not discuss this incident with family colleagues or any person not directly authorized. I acknowledge that the vessel in question never existed in official records." Nakamura read it twice, then looked up. "Transport vessel X-447. That's correct." "Admiral, the Shinano was..." "There is no Shinano." Nagano's voice flat, final. "There never was. You served on a transport. It sank. Unknown causes. 1,400 men died in an unfortunate accident. That's the story. That's the only story. But sir, the families will be told their sons died serving the Empire. Location classified. Details classified. Everything classified." Nagano leaned forward. "Do you understand what I'm telling you? Commander, the Shinano never existed. We did not build the world's largest carrier, only to lose her in 17 hours to a single submarine. That story cannot exist. So it doesn't." Nakamura stared at the paper, at the lie typed cleanly on official letterhead. "And if I refuse to sign, then you'll be charged with possessing classified information without authorization. Court-martial. Execution. Your family dishonored." Nagano pushed a pen across the table. "Or you sign. You live. You keep silent. You serve Japan by forgetting. Forgetting 1,400 men. Forgetting everything." The room was silent except for the scratch of pen on paper as Nakamura signed. His signature looked like someone else's. Shaky. Defeated. The signature of a man who'd chosen survival over truth. "Good." Nagano took the document. "You're reassigned. Patrol boat duty. Northern waters. You leave tomorrow. Dismissed." Nakamura stood, saluted, walked out. In the hallway, he passed Ensign Yasuda, waiting to be called in. Their eyes met. Yasuda's face asked the question his mouth couldn't. Nakamura shook his head slowly. Kept walking. Inside the room, Yasuda sat where Nakamura had sat. Read the same document. Felt the same weight. "I was there," he said quietly. I sealed compartments. Heard men screaming. I know what happened. No. Nagano's voice tired now. Old. You know what you think happened. But memories are unreliable, Ensign, especially traumatic memories. You were in shock, exhausted. You can't trust what you think you saw. I saw the Shinano sink. You saw a transport sink. X-447. Say it. Yasuda's jaw clenched. I saw. Say it, Ensign, or die saying something else. Your choice. Yasuda closed his eyes, saw those watertight doors, heard those voices, felt the weight of choosing who lived and who died. And now they wanted him to pretend none of it happened. He signed, because surviving meant complying, and complying meant lying, and lying meant he'd carry 1,400 ghosts in silence for the rest of his life. They all signed, every survivor. One by one they filed through that windowless room and signed away the truth. Some resisted, most didn't. What was the point? The ship was gone. The men were dead. Signing or not signing wouldn't change that. But it changed them. By December 5, 1944, the survivors had been scattered across the Pacific, reassigned to distant posts, separated so they couldn't talk, couldn't compare stories, couldn't build a collective memory that might challenge the official silence. Nakamura went north to the Kurili's frozen hell, where patrol boats hunted nothing in waters too cold for war. Yasuda went south to the Philippines jungle combat, where the average life expectancy was 3 weeks. Miura went to a training command in Hokkaido, teaching new pilots tactics that wouldn't save them. They never saw each other again. The families of the dead received letters, standardized, impersonal. Your son died honorably serving the Empire. Location classified. Details classified. His sacrifice will never be forgotten, but his name would be. Because how do you remember someone who officially never died? How do you mourn a ghost? In Yokosuka Saburo Teata read the newspaper report. Small article. Bottom of page 7. Transport vessel lost in accident. Casualties reported. Names withheld pending notification. He knew. Didn't need confirmation. He'd built that ship. Knew exactly how she'd fail. And now she had. He pulled up the floorboards in his apartment, retrieved the wooden box, opened it. The letter to his son. The steel sample from batch 447. Evidence of everything they were trying to bury. His hands shook as he held the letter. Should he send it? Should he tell the truth? Should he become the voice that wouldn't be silenced? His son was still in Burma, still in the army, still vulnerable to threats. Teata put the letter back, sealed the box, buried it again. But he carved something new into the wall behind his workbench where no one would see Shinano. November 29, 1944. 435 men. Never forget. 3 words in steel. His own silent memorial. The war ended 9 months later. Japan surrendered. American forces occupied. And in the chaos of defeat, the silence around the Shinano deepened. War crimes trials focused on atrocities, prison camps, civilian massacres, medical experiments. A carrier that sank because of bad construction. Not a war crime, just an embarrassment. So it stayed buried. Years passed, then decades. Survivors aged, some died. Others drank themselves into forgetting. A few tried to speak, mentioned the Shinano in bars to family, to anyone who'd listen. No one listened. Or if they did, they didn't believe. The largest carrier in the world sunk in 17 hours, impossible. Must be war trauma. Confused memories. The mind playing tricks. Commander Nakamura, now just. Nakamura, discharged after the war, worked in a factory making bicycle parts. Every night he drank. Sake first, then anything. Drinking didn't erase the memories, but it blurred them enough to survive. His wife asked once, "What happened to you in the war?" "Nothing. I was lucky." "You don't act lucky." "I'm alive. That's lucky enough." She never asked again. But she watched him deteriorate year by year, drink by drink, carrying weight he wouldn't share. Ensign Yasuda, now Yasuda, no rank, no navy, became a schoolteacher. Taught history to children too young to remember war. He never mentioned his service. Never told them about the Shinano. Never spoke about sealing doors while men screamed behind them. But sometimes late at night, grading papers, he'd stop, pen hovering over a student's essay about courage and sacrifice. And he'd wonder, was what he did courage or cowardice dressed in duty? He never found an answer. In 1952, American naval historians published patrol reports from USS Archerfish. Commander Enright's log detailed the attack. 4 torpedoes. Large carrier. Sunk in 17 hours. Estimated displacement, 70,000 tons. The report created whispers, rumors. A few Japanese veterans began talking quietly. But Tokyo denied everything. No such carrier existed. American propaganda, confusion, mistaken identity. The silence held. In 1960, Saburo Teada lay dying. Cancer probably from years of welding fumes, metal dust, industrial poison. His son Hiroshi returned from Tokyo to sit beside him. "Father, is there anything you need to tell me?" Teada's hand squeezed his son's, weak, trembling. "Under the floorboards, box. Open it after I'm gone." "What's in it?" "Truth." Teada closed his eyes. "Someone has to know. Someone has to remember." He died 3 days later. Hiroshi opened the box, found the letter, read it, didn't understand half of it. Batch 447, compartment C47. What did it mean? He kept the box anyway. Put it in his closet. Forgot about it for 20 years. In 1978, American submarine veterans held a reunion. Commander Enright, now elderly, decorated, celebrated, gave a speech about his career. He mentioned the Shinano. Called it the largest target any submarine commander ever sank. Showed photographs. Shared coordinates. A Japanese journalist heard about it, started investigating. Found survivors now in their 60s, 70s. Most refused to talk. But a few near the end of their lives decided silence had lasted long enough. Nakamura was one. 71 years old, liver failing. He agreed to an interview. "Tell me about the Shinano." Nakamura stared at the journalist for a long time. Then, "You want the official story or the truth?" "The truth." "The truth is, I'm a coward." Nakamura's voice rough, damaged from decades of drinking. "I was executive officer on the largest carrier in the world. I knew she wasn't ready. Knew the steel was bad. Knew we were sailing to die. And I said nothing. Did nothing. Followed orders. 1,400 men drowned because men like me chose obedience over courage." "But you survived. You're telling the story now." 34 years late. Nakamura laughed, bitter, broken. "I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid of execution. Afraid of dishonor. Afraid of truth. So I signed their paper, accepted their lie, and spent 3 decades drinking to forget what I helped hide. Why talk now? Because I'm dying anyway. They can't hurt me anymore. And someone needs to say it. The Shinano was real. She sank. 1,435 men died. And the Navy buried them twice, once in the ocean, once in silence." Nakamura leaned forward. "Write that. Print it. Make them remember." The article ran in 1979. Created controversy. The Naval Ministry denied everything. Called Nakamura a liar, a drunk, a man with damaged memories seeking attention. But other survivors came forward. Yasuda, Miura, Tanaka the cook, Kobayashi. Men who'd been silent for 35 years, suddenly speaking. Their stories matched. Details aligned. The truth was surfacing. Tokyo couldn't deny anymore. In 1980, they released limited records. Admitted the Shinano existed. Admitted she sank. But blamed it on unfortunate circumstances, and acceptable losses during wartime. No mention of bad steel. No mention of rushed construction. No mention of warnings ignored. The survivors weren't satisfied. They'd broken silence only to have the truth sanitized. Again. Yasuda, now 62, spoke at a memorial service. They want us to remember the Shinano as a noble sacrifice, a ship that fought bravely and lost honorably. But that's another lie. The Shinano didn't fight. She didn't lose honorably. She sank because we built her with shortcuts and sailed her unready. She sank because truth mattered less than propaganda, and 1,400 men drowned in the gap between what we claimed and what we knew. He paused. The audience, survivors, families, historians, sat silent. I sealed men behind watertight doors, heard them screaming, left them to drown because saving them meant killing others. That choice haunts me. But you know what haunts me more? That I stayed silent about it for 35 years. That I let the Navy bury the truth along with the bodies. That I chose my life over their memory. His voice broke. I can't give them back their lives, but I can give them back their story. And I can make sure we remember not the lie about a noble ship that fought bravely, but the truth about a compromised ship that never should have sailed. Because if we forget what really happened, we're doomed to build more ships like her. More lies, more deaths, more silence. The audience stood, applauded, wept. In 1985, marine archaeologists found the wreck, 4,000 feet down, exactly where Enright's coordinates placed her. They sent down cameras, found the hull split open, found the torpedo damage, and in the debris field, they found something else: steel samples from the damaged sections. Analysis confirmed it's substandard steel. Brittle, compromised. Exactly as Teyada had warned 41 years earlier. Hiroshi Teyada, now 63, a grandfather himself, heard about the discovery, remembered the box, pulled it from his closet, read his father's letter again. This time it made sense, all of it. He contacted the researchers, gave them the steel sample his father had saved, showed them the letter. The sample matched, batch 447, the same compromised steel they'd found in the wreck. Your father knew, the researcher said. He knew before the ship even sailed. He tried to tell them. They threatened him, threatened me. So he stayed silent. And it killed 1,400 men. He documented it, though. He left evidence. That counts. Does it? Hiroshi stared at the letter in his father's handwriting. He stayed silent when speaking might have saved them. He left evidence that surfaced 40 years too late. Does that count as courage or cowardice? The researcher had no answer. Neither did anyone. In 1992, Japan finally held official hearings. Survivors testified. Engineers testified. Historians presented evidence. The conclusion was quiet, but honest. The Shinano sank due to systemic failures in construction command and oversight. Pride and propaganda were prioritized over preparation and truth. The loss of 1,435 men was preventable. Not a war crime, not even criminal negligence, just preventable. The families wanted more, wanted names, wanted accountability. Who gave the orders? Who ignored the warnings? Who threatened workers into silence? All dead now, or too old, or protected by decades of bureaucracy. Justice delayed is justice denied. The cliché was bitter because it was true. But something else happened. The survivors, those still alive, began meeting, sharing stories, building collective memory, and in 1995 they proposed a memorial. Tokyo resisted. A memorial meant acknowledging failure, acknowledging that the Imperial Navy had built a floating coffin and sailed it anyway. But the survivors persisted. And in 1998, at Yokosuka Naval Base, where the Shinano had been built, a memorial gate was erected. Simple design, steel beams, good steel, the survivors insisted, forming an arch. One side stood complete, the other side incomplete, broken open, unfinished. Like the ship, like the truth. like everything the Shinano represented. On the complete side, Moan 435 names. Every man who died. Engraved in steel that would outlast memory. On the incomplete side, a plaque, the Shinano, November 28 to 29, 1944. Built with ambition. Sailed with haste. Sunk with silence. 1,435 men died not from torpedoes, but from truth deferred. We remember not to shame, but to prevent. We remember not to hate, but to learn. May this gate stand half open forever, a reminder that unfinished preparation leads to finished tragedy. At the dedication ceremony, Nakamura spoke. 87 years old, sober for the first time in decades, voice weak but clear. I spent 50 years trying to forget, trying to bury what happened in alcohol in silence. But you can't bury truth forever. It rises, always rises. Sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes it takes generations. But it rises. He touched the memorial gate. His fingers traced names, friends, men he'd commanded, men he'd failed. These men didn't die for Japan. They died because Japan lied to them, to us, to itself. We built a ship we knew would fail. We sailed knowing it wasn't ready. And when it sank, we buried the story along with the bodies. He turned to face the crowd. Survivors, families, school children. That's the real tragedy. Not that she sank, but that we tried to pretend she never existed. We dishonored the dead by erasing them, and we ensured their deaths meant nothing by refusing to learn from them. His voice strengthened. So we remember, not to wallow in guilt, not to fuel hatred, but to ask ourselves every day, are we building more Shinanos? Are we prioritizing appearance over substance? Are we silencing truth because it's inconvenient? Are we sacrificing people for symbols? He paused. If the answer is yes, then these 1,400 men died for nothing. But if we learn, if we speak truth even when it's difficult, if we refuse to sail ships we know will sink, if we remember that human lives matter more than propaganda, then maybe finally their deaths mean something. The crowd was silent. Then someone began applauding. Others joined. Within seconds, everyone. Not celebration, recognition. The acknowledgement that speaking truth even 50 years late mattered. Nakamura died 6 months later. His funeral was small, but representatives from the Shinano Survivors Association attended. They placed a flower at the memorial gate, added his name to a list of those who remembered. Yasuda lived until 2003, taught history until the end. His last lecture to high school students covered the Shinano. He showed them photographs, read them excerpts from survivor accounts. Then asked, if you were the captain given orders to sail an unfinished ship, what would you do? The students debated. Some said obey orders, some said refuse, some said try to compromise. Yasuda listened, then said, there is no right answer, only terrible choices and worse choices. But the one unforgivable choice is the one I made silence. I knew the truth. I survived, and I stayed quiet for 35 years. Don't make my mistake. When you see something wrong, speak. Even if your voice shakes. Even if no one listens. Speak. Because silence protects nothing but cowards. He died 3 days later. Heart attack. The students attended his funeral. One of them gave a eulogy that ended, he taught us history. But more importantly, he taught us courage. The courage to speak truth, even when truth is painful. Today, the memorial gate at Yokosuka stands half open. Visitors come daily. School children on field trips, veterans, historians, families of the dead. They walk through the incomplete arch, read the names, touch the steel. Some leave flowers. Some leave notes. Some just stand in silence contemplating what it means to build something doomed, sail it anyway, and spend decades burying the truth. The Shinano didn't sink in 17 hours. That was just the hull. The truth took 70 years to surface. And even now questions remain. How many men could have been saved if warnings had been heeded? How many lives were sacrificed for propaganda? How many other Shinanos were built, sailed and lost in silence? We'll never know. Some records were destroyed. Some survivors died without speaking. Some truth stays buried forever. But we know enough. Enough to learn. Enough to remember. Enough to ask ourselves, what are we building today that we know will fail? What warnings are we ignoring? What silence are we protecting? Because the Shinano's real lesson isn't about shipbuilding or naval warfare. It's about the cost of prioritizing symbols over substance propaganda, over preparation, obedience over truth. It's about the 1,400 men who drowned not because torpedoes struck, but because truth was silenced. And it's about the survivors who carried that silence for decades, crushed by guilt. They never earned punished for obedience. They couldn't refuse. The memorial gate stands half open, not as failure, but as invitation. Step through, remember, learn, and refuse to build more ships that sail to silence. They built her with lies. They sailed her with haste. They sank her with silence. But she is remembered with truth. And that truth, painful, delayed, incomplete, is the only memorial that matters. If you believe their names must be remembered, share this story. Write a name in the comments. Speak one truth today that you've been afraid to speak. Because the Shinano taught us silence drowns, truth floats, and memory is the lifeboat that carries the dead home.